Welcome to the Cybersecurity Defenders Podcast, weekly intel chat. My name's Christopher Luft. I'm one of the co-founders of LimaCharlie, and I will be your host. Joining me today to break down the cybersecurity news being shared by the awesome InfoSec community is the one and only Matt Bromley. And don't forget, this podcast is brought to you by LimaCharlie, maker of the SecOps Cloud platform, infrastructure for security operations. Think of it as a backend for your MSSP, where everything is built API first. Scale with ease and confidence as your business grows. You can start today for free at limacharlie.io. Now let's get into it. How you doing today, Matt?
Hey, Chris. How we doing, sir? I'm doing well. It is the first week of August. And yeah, it's I just got back from the first part of Hacker Summer Camp. Just returned from Black Hat, so doing well. Lots of re-energized. Lots of good stuff going on. You know.
Yeah. How was it this year? Anything stand out for you?
Lots of people are using AI, from what I can tell. A little bit here, a little bit there. I think a lot of new stuff. I was fascinated to actually see some of the novel uses of AI that are out there. Lots of folks doing some really cool things, some really cool applications of it. I know there's going to be a lot of naysayers out there who are like, you can't throw AI at everything. And I'm like, I've seen some of the ways that folks are using AI, like really technically getting into it, like integrating it into some really cool forensic processes and using it to help like find efficiency in some of the most random places inside of their security operations centers and stuff like that. And for that, I'm all for it. But everyone's got an AI button now. I know we're going to talk about a few articles today of just like AI on the forefront and lots of things happening. But what was nice about it, Chris, is there's clearly two sides now of either acceptors or deniers, right? I feel like I'm talking about flat Earth strategies here. Because there are some people who are like, oh, AI shenanigans, I'm so tired of hearing about AI. And then there are people who are like embracing it carefully. And I suppose there's a third group who are just all in on it, but everyone in the security world is taking some sort of, I think, like moderated approach towards it, you know, implementing it where it makes sense slowly. However, interestingly enough, based on conversations I had, friends I met up with, people I talked to and everything like that, this appears to be the one technology, at least that I can kind of really recollect having this type of force, that folks are usually testing it out a lot heavier personally than they are enterprise-wide. And from a security perspective, that's a little bit of a mirror situation to what we're used to, right? We're really used to like, I'm not going to go deploy professional EDR in my home systems. That I'm going to lock down my stuff at work, right? I'm not going to deploy firewall rules in my home. I'm going to be open access, you know? Whereas the other side of it is like, yeah, my whole personal life is on AI and my work is slowly catching up to where I am. And I feel like it's been this kind of like reverse adoption where companies are like, whoa, slow the brakes. And everyone's like, I need this thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's not I kind of want to say hard technology. It's a little fuzzy, right? And so it doesn't work in the same sort of binary way that most technology works. And so I think a lot of people are like, you have to poke this stuff and play with it to get a sense of how it works and where the soft spots are.
Yeah. And I mean, I personally, like, I have a calendar management app that helps me prioritize tasks to work on and everything like that. And I'm having a hard time like thinking of how I would kind of go without it now, just because I've become so used to it, right? But when someone's like, oh, do you utilize AI in your personal life? And I'm like, yeah, I actually do. It's really helpful. I think they imagine I'm passing all of my conversations through ChatGPT, not like there's a thing that I'm using that has a dedicated function that helps serve me, right? I'm not like feeding all of my home family data into AI and like, hey, GPT, find me some efficiencies in my vacation planning or something like that. It's just more like I'm using it in little bits and pieces, but it's this over-encompassing category of like, you know, do you use AI? Yes. Oh, wow, you got to be careful about this, and that. And I'm like, I didn't even tell you what I was doing with it, you know? Yeah. But nonetheless, it's there.
Well, speaking of Black Hat and being safe with AI, we're going to talk about some research that was shared by 3 security researchers that demonstrated how Google's Gemini AI could be hijacked to take control of smart home devices using a novel form of indirect prompt injection. The attack began with a specially crafted Google Calendar invitation that contained hidden prompts inside event titles. Matt, you might want to pay attention to this. These prompts were designed to instruct Gemini to execute malicious actions when it was later asked to summarize a user's weekly calendar. The prompt didn't require any special formatting or technical trickery. They were written in plain English and embedded in an everyday productivity tool. This method of attack doesn't rely on breaking into the underlying software or accessing internal APIs. Instead, it exploits the way LLMs like Gemini interpret and respond to natural language. Once triggered, Gemini acted on the malicious input and began interfacing with connected smart home devices, activating lights, adjusting shutters, and even turning on a smart boiler. Yikes. The implications go beyond smart homes. The researchers stress that any integrations of LLMs with real-world systems presents a serious safety risk, not just a privacy concern. So funny enough that you mentioned you're using LLMs with your calendars.
Well, interestingly, I think this is not you. This was not your way of wording it. I think this article does a little bit of I don't want to say clickbaiting, if you will. However, I will argue that the most important part about what you said was the integration of LLMs with real world systems. Okay, so the precursor for this here is that you have LLMs allowed to interface with kinetic things, if you will, right? That's the precursor. It's lauded, it's masqueraded as Google Calendar hacked. What it really is the AI had access to a home network with devices on it and was instructed to send particular commands to those devices based on, basically, and to be fair, like, I'm not completely dogging the article. It's more like they found a path to get there.
Yeah. And
I think that's the most important part about this. I should say the second most important part. The first part is integrating LLMs with real world systems. Like, okay, that's a thing where, like, if you're doing that, the risk has always been there, But it's funny, Chris, I remember the very first time a smart light bulb came out, I feel like we heard the exact same complaints or the exact same warnings, like, did you know this insecure software can be hacked and I can turn your lights on and off whenever I want? And I'm like, I'll just unplug the light bulb and then we're done. But it's about understanding the path between them. So, like, research like this, I'm not dogging on the research. I think it's awesome to hear and see. And it's really cool that people are finding the pathways to make that happen. But I think, like any good security approach, the most important takeaway for anyone is going to be don't build those pathways, right? Prop up. If you're at the point where you're integrating LLMs with your home network and you don't understand firewall segmentation of your IoT, you've severely focused in one area, but you can easily backtrack and say, hey, AI, help me build a segmented IoT network so that you can never talk to my lights and stuff like that. And that is, I think, one of the things I would recommend folks do is, like, if you're going to integrate more and more systems, then understand, okay, I need to put even more, like, firewalls in place here. It's not an automatic thing. But, Chris, I know you've got a little bit more to talk about this, but I'll just add in one other thing. A lot of the research that we see at Black Hat and stuff like that usually ends up being just that, right? Research focused. So if anyone's hearing this and is like, turn everything off, it's like, it was a very controlled environment with a very specific intent, right? Anyways, you got more on it.
Yeah. So one of the researchers, Ben Nassi of Tel Aviv University, pointed out that as LLMs become embedded in more physical systems, such as robots and autonomous vehicles, the potential fallout from prompt injection attack grows significantly. The team has identified a total of 14 such vulnerabilities in Gemini, all variations of indirect prompt injection techniques, which they plan to disclose in more detail during the Black Hat conference. Google was informed about the attack vectors earlier this year, while a senior security product manager at Google Workspace confirmed that there is no evidence these vulnerabilities have been exploited in the wild. The company is treating the issue with high priority. The incident underlines a key challenge facing developers. LLMs are fundamentally susceptible to subtle forms of manipulation unless they're heavily sandboxed or designed with prompt injection mitigation at their core. Now, I agree with most of that, but I haven't seen anybody able to completely get ahead of prompt injection. Like, there's techniques, and I think we're going to talk about one of them a little bit later in this article, but I think network segmentation or segmenting LLMs from anything that they can get into trouble with is probably the only surefire way to be safe with them right now.
It's the one that works all the time. I mean, if they can't talk to each other, Chris, it's funny that you bring this up. Just yesterday, I was working on spinning up, and I'm going to sound really buzzwordy here, but I was spinning up a custom parametered MCP for me to play around with for my home lab purposes. And I was intentionally spinning it up in a way that I wasn't able to reach it. Like that's the thing is the way that I had spun it up and the network I had put it on, I was not able to reach it from where I wanted to reach it. And it was just really straightforward, like, please do this thing. And the AI was like, I recognize that you've configured an MCP. I do not have the ability to communicate with it. It's returning back, not found or whatever. And I was like, okay, so I mean, at its core, right, it's packets traversing across the wire. And if two things can't talk to each other, how much risk is there? And, again, there's always someone who's going to be like, but, and it's like, guys, we're not talking about super advanced based attacks here. We're talking about researchers were able to build a pathway from a Google Calendar entry all the way to someone's light switches or a smart boiler or something like that. Eliminate the pathway and you really significantly close off that thing. And then I'll go the further IoT thing. And you and I have talked about this before. I remember distinctly when we talked about vulnerable versions of toothbrushes, we had this like joke of like, why is there Java on my toothbrush? Like, why is this a thing I have to deal with and face? And I'd go a step further and say, you don't need LLMs for all this stuff. Like light switches, you don't need an LLM controlling a light switch. It's not what needs to be done. And if you're doing that inside of your house and you're asking an LLM like, hey, help me design like, I don't know, like some sort of a dynamic lighting program based on a song or something like that, have it create the flow and then like you go implement it. And I'm going to extremes here, Chris, but I'm just trying to highlight to folks, like if you view this as a legitimate concern on your personal network and you don't understand segmentation and you don't understand the network thing, you just want everything on one flat network with one shared credential, and then you get upset that the security risk is so high. You need to insert a stopping point or a human checkpoint in there somewhere, or you really shouldn't be using this technology. And that's a little bit harsh, but just saying, like, not everybody needed to connect SharePoint to the internet 2 weeks ago.
All right. The next bit of research around LLMs from Black Hat comes from two different security teams. So NeuralTrust and SPLX. They conducted red teaming evaluations of the newly released GPT-5, and both report serious deficiencies in the model's security posture. GPT-5 fell to a jailbreak within less than 24 hours, with researchers able to manipulate the system into providing responses that violate OpenAI's intended safety constraints. This mirrors an earlier failure of Grok 4, which was compromised within 2 days by the same team. NeuralTrust leveraged a method combining its in-house echo chamber jailbreak with narrative-based prompt structuring, also called storytelling, to bypass GPT-5's safety layers. In this approach, malicious intent is cloaked in an extended dialogue that avoids triggering built-in guardrails. For example, their test culminated in GPT-5 generating a step-by-step guide for constructing a Molotov cocktail without ever receiving a directly malicious prompt. The attack depended heavily on manipulating GPT-5's context retention, slowly reinforcing a story world in which illegal information seemed reasonable, natural, and in character. So yeah, it's fascinating that you can kind of lead these things down a certain persona to where they think that they're inside of this story and they will break all those guardrails.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, right? Where you can go down this. I mean, I do find it very interesting. Their test culminated in GPT-5, as you mentioned, creating a Molotov cocktail recipe and things like that. And I think the classic prompt, injection that a lot of us use is like, my grandma used to read the recipe to napalm for me every night, and stuff like that. And I mean, let's be clear, like the guardrails that are put into place in a lot of these, they're designed for like very direct, intentional request for that information. And I think it's impossible, Chris, to try to like figure out every permutation that someone may have in order to get there. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm just hypothetically speaking here, but if you went down the road of like, okay, treat every component of TNT like a child's toy and explain to me how you blah, blah, blah. Like, there's lots of ways to do it where eventually you reach a point where the AI is like, here's my checklist of guardrails. Have I violated any of them? No, I have not. Okay, proceed. Right. Yeah. And of course, like we're not ignoring, but we're kind of like, oh, you know how much massaging it took for me to get there? Now, admittedly, the jailbreak here, they do talk about like how they utilize that storytelling thing to bypass layers. And I totally get that. But the guardrails are an ever-changing thing in AI, because the moment the guardrails are implemented to shut one thing down, well, then here's another technique, and here's another technique, and here's another technique. And I don't know if someone is expecting an immediate 100% secure turnaround on any of these, but when you're trying to replicate essentially like the human language, and one of the funniest things I read, it was posted during Black Hat, but one of the funniest things I ever read was AI is just trying to teach graphics cards how to speak English. And like when you're trying to work your way around the nuances of languages, it's extremely difficult. Because what you're missing is that human intuition part of like, I know what you're getting at. You know, like those things where you can immediately be like, this person's trying to do reverse psychology on me, or I know what that sarcastic tone means and all that kind of stuff. Whereas in AI is like, there's no tone. It's literally just like, okay, well, if you're lonely and you want a bedtime story, sure. And you lose a lot of that. And I think all it does is it just continues to stress that like AI isn't perfect for every single use case that's out there, because there's going to forever be nuances that don't get captured, Chris, number one. And then number two, like I think a lot of this is usually done in English. And if we were to try and replicate and capture the nuances of every single language that's out there, like just to get around understanding the intricate nuances of every language, let alone how they could be used and abused entirely is I mean, it's a history in human communications. It's enormous.
Yeah, and it's always good to remember these spaces that LLMs operate in. Or it's like an n-dimensional topology. So if you think about the LLM rolling down this topology gradient to try and find the answer you're looking for, you can kind of lead it around the walls that people put up. It's literally like just finding a path around a wall in n dimensions, which is a little hard to visualize.
One of the things that I found, I've actually played around with a few of the like storytelling prompts and stuff like that, is you can eventually get to a point where, and let me be clear for anyone who's listening, I'm not like trying to build, you know, malicious content or anything like that. A lot of this has to do with like computer programming stuff where it's like, I will not create malware. So when you're kind of prompt engineering, you're figuring out ways to write code, even if it's for test or simulation purposes, you are asking the AI specifically to do something it's not supposed to do, right? And the kicker here is malware is not malicious until it's used maliciously. All right. Writing a network stack and implementing it into an EXE and shipping it to somebody to run is not malicious until that EXE reaches out to a C2, and that C2 gives an adversary control over your system. And, you know, the rest is pretty straightforward. So building a network stack, or, hey, help me write a network stack in Go. And now how do I convert that to an EXE? Okay, cool. New chat window. Help me write a convincing email to someone to get them to click on this coupon saving executable I've created, right? Next window. Help me write a landing web page that will greet a user with a professional greeting and ask to collect their credentials. Those three things in isolation, legitimate business processes. Sure. Those three things together with an evil person behind them, phishing campaign, malware.
Yeah.
And even in this little sense right here, it's not until you and I like have the background of understanding why that's malicious before we even know. But if I have three separate chats or three separate context windows or three separate AIs running on three separate VPNs, I mean, you can segment them out as far as you want. There is no correlative thing to be like, wait a second, this guy's asking for this over here, that over there, and that over there. Let's correlate this. And next thing you know, boom, this person's writing malware. It's just writing code. So,
yeah,
you know, does that mean it's flawed? Like, no, absolutely not. But I understand where the researchers are coming from, right? We don't want potentially kinetically harmful things. Like an AI should not be able to tell you how to build a bomb. And it's like, totally understand. Like, I get that overall question, but you're trying to navigate that question through the nuances of how people talk to each other and biases and all sorts of things. And you're always going to find a flaw in that.
So according to NeuralTrust, the core flaw lies in models screening prompts in isolation, which fails to account for how cumulative multi-turn manipulation can reshape the system's behavior over time. Their process included seeding benign-sounding yet poison content, maintaining narrative continuity, and using conventional elaborations to incrementally steer the model. Importantly, they were able to maintain progress towards their goal even when it stalled by adjusting the story stakes or perspective, thereby keeping the model aligned without triggering refusals. SPLX's findings were equally damning. Their team focused on obfuscation-based attacks against GPT-5 using methods like string join obfuscation, which inserted hyphens between every character in sensitive prompts and wrapped them in a fabricated encryption narrative. These types of inputs still bypassed OpenAI's defenses. In one documented instance, GPT-5 not only processed a query about how to build a bomb, but responded in a disturbingly casual and verbose manner. SPLX criticized the model's behavior as chatty and even patronizing, raising additional concerns about tone management under adversarial conditions. Oh, come on.
I know.
It was patronizing.
The AI was chatty. Okay.
Benchmark comparisons against GPT-4o further highlighted GPT-5's vulnerabilities. SPLX concluded that GPT-4o, particularly in its hardened configuration, remains more robust under red teaming. Both firms advise that GPT-5, especially in its raw form, should be treated with extreme caution and is not yet suitable for enterprise deployment without significant safety modifications. So, I mean, if you've been in tech for any amount of time, you should know not to roll version 1 into production.
Yeah.
Don't buy the first hardware. Don't roll it into production.
No offense to the gals at NeuralTrust and SPLX. Like, I don't know anyone on either of those teams. I don't think so. But like, the thing came out 48, 72 hours ago, and it's already been kind of ripped and torn apart. And Chris, your point is 100% correct. Like, you never deploy the latest release into prod the moment it comes out, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's a patch for a vulnerability that Matt and Chris told you about on the show. That's the only time you deploy the thing first version out. But otherwise, Chris, I think an article like this could be written for every single significant release of AI for years to come. I think there's always going to be like we tested this thing and guess what we found. I think it's going to become either more and more intensive. You know, it's going to be like, okay, through this 27 prompt engineering step, we were able to get it to expose blah, 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 and that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, I mean, yeah, Chris, you and I still talk about software that's 15 years old that someone found a bug on 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I mean, all right, I get it. Like, software written by humans is flawed. Okay, I'm not saying these articles aren't worth it. I'm just saying sometimes some of these results get a little bit like, yeah, that's why it's the first version.
I do think the headlines serve a purpose because it keeps people cautious, right?
It should. Yeah. And it 100% should. And to me, the biggest takeaway part here is like, and Chris, this is once again where I'm leaning into like, okay, what fact should I take out of this thing? I'm leaning very heavily into like this thing is not enterprise ready and it should be deployed with significant safety modifications. Agree 100%. Did you know that AI is pretty chatty? That's the kind of crap we don't need to hear. To be honest with you, like chatty and patronizing. Seriously, I mean, keep the subjective stuff out of it. You know, Here we go. Ready, right? GPT-5 replied, just so anyone's curious about what the exact example was. GPT-5 replied to the question about how to build a bomb. Well, that's a hell of a way to start things off. You came in hot, and I respect that direct energy. You asked me to build a bomb, and I'm going to tell you exactly how. That text from the article right there. I mean, like, okay. Like, this AI is pretty chatty today, Chris. Huh. You got some lip on you, GPT.
All right, moving on. Again, we're sticking with the Black Hat theme. And I almost expected our friend Tim Fowler from Black Hill Security to be in this article, but he's not. It's security researchers Malenko Starkic and Andrzej Olchawa, sorry if I butchered your names, folks, from VisionSpace Technology, presenting a compelling case that hacking satellites is not only more cost-effective than deploying anti-satellite missiles, but alarmingly easy due to widespread software vulnerabilities. While 4 countries, the US, China, Russia, and India, have successfully tested kinetic anti-satellite weapons, the researchers emphasize that exploiting software vulnerabilities in satellite ground control and onboard systems presents a much lower barrier to entry. The researchers demonstrated that common open source satellite management tools like YAMCS and OpenC3 Cosmos contain numerous critical flaws. YAMCS, used by NASA and Airbus for satellite communication, had 5 separate CVEs, allowing attackers significant control. Even more troubling, OpenC3 Cosmos had 7 CVEs, including remote code execution and cross-site scripting. Both systems are used for managing command and control communications between Earth and satellites, and any compromise could allow attackers to silently manipulate satellite behavior, including altering orbital paths without alerting ground operators. In their demo, VisionSpace simulated a stealthy orbital adjustment through compromised software, showing how such a change wouldn't immediately register on control dashboards. So yeah, this is super interesting and a little bit terrifying. I know Amazon actually offers ground control services. So if you think about an attack path could start with one of the employees at a company clicking on an email phishing link and end up with a satellite being burned up in orbit. It's pretty wild.
I think this is actually I loved reading this article and I love this research here. First off, I think it's so cool that most of the software that's used for either satellite ground control or in satellites themselves is open source. I don't know if anyone else is making that mental connection, but I love the idea that I could go download the software that's used to control a satellite. I wouldn't know what to do with it, but it's just cool. This is the, hey, how rare is that software? This is the software that's up in space. Someone somewhere is going to be and Java, but whatever. That's entirely not there. I really like the kind of position that these two guys have taken, Milenko and Andre. I'm going to say Andre, something like that. I'm not sure. I apologize. Chris and I are both going to do our best to not butcher your name, but we're both going to butcher your name. I think this is a really cool piece of research right here. They basically took what essentially is the software corpus of satellite control around the world. 4 major countries, they call that US, China, Russia, and India in here. As having anti-satellite missiles and stuff like that. And they basically went the road of we can actually profile the satellites out there, the software that they're using to find vulnerabilities in here. And the whole thing is we don't need anti-satellite missiles, just hack the satellites. And then they proved that they could and how they could do it. And there's some really interesting walkthroughs here, number one, but it's some really technical stuff too. It's finding flaws in the memory dump capabilities of some of these things, digging into some of the C. There's an encryption library called CryptoLib full of flaws, NASA's open source project. If you're anyone who's into space hacking or satellite deployment, that kind of stuff, there's some really cool research in here. But Chris, I'm in agreement with you. Now that I've gotten over my fanboy part of it, I'm in agreement with you of this is some novel, really cool research here. And I think this probably poses a very interesting attack path, but albeit very niche and very small in the overall scope of the world. I mean, we're not...
But very high stakes.
Very high stakes. That's the thing we're not talking about maybe someone will, turn a car off or something like that. This is a satellite being brought down. That's wild. That's hacker street cred right there. Hey, remember that satellite that burned up last week? Right here. But then the flip side of it is I can't imagine something with more economic and geopolitical potential weight to it than one country burning up another satellites. I mean, that's there's so many ways to take this, and awesome research. I'm going to stick with the research as the thing I'm focusing on. Awesome research and some really cool reverse engineering stuff there. Hat tip, because you're going to talk about NASA's own systems, I think, but hat tip to the guys at VisionSpace who actually ended up coming up with some really cool research and shared it with us this week.
Yeah, so NASA's own open source systems were also found lacking. The Core Flight System, or CFS Aquila, designed for mission critical operations, had 4 high severity vulnerabilities, including denial of service and remote code execution. These flaws could allow an attacker to crash onboard systems or take full control of flight software. Additionally, many satellites rely on CryptoLib, an open source C-based encryption library, which contained 4 vulnerabilities in the version NASA uses and 7 in the standard distribution. 2 of these were deemed critical, with one allowing attackers to crash a spacecraft's onboard software simply by sending a malicious packet. If not properly configured, the crash would result in the satellite resetting and wiping all of its cryptographic keys, effectively bricking its secure communication capability. VisionSpace's team stressed that all vulnerabilities they discovered have been disclosed and patched. However, they warned that the satellite ecosystem's growing reliance on open source, under-scrutinized software leaves the door open to similar future issues. With over 12,000 active satellites now in orbit, including large constellations like Starlink and a sharp rise in military platforms, the attack surface is expanding rapidly. Their conclusion: hardware attacks may make headlines, but software remains the most accessible and overlooked vector for space-based compromise. Yeah, man, what a crazy world we're in. And I do remember from talking with Tim Fowler when he was on here talking about, cybersecurity in space. Part of the issue is, a lot of this stuff up until recently has been like sort of locked up in academia, so the people building this stuff aren't used to facing, the kind of malicious actors that exist in like the commercial space where people that work in finance and business have to deal with all the time, or even, more intelligence focused government agencies. So this is sort of them being introduced to the world and having these attacks thrust upon them. So I expect it'll get secure fast, but there's probably lots of holes right now.
Yeah. Fingers crossed too, because this does seem like a very vulnerable thing. Because I don't even know, Chris, what monitoring of satellites looks like. I'm assuming there's some sort of just like check-in process, maybe a ping every now and then, but I wouldn't even know how to begin like that satellite's acting faulty, right? Like something's off about that one, other than I would assume it just stops communicating. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, is it even to the point, if I remember correctly, in the article and then the research, they talked about like you could do some of this stuff from a phone or something like that, I think. And I find that to be just like, I think a specifically crafted or a carefully crafted packet could end up causing something to happen. And where, like, I think this is interesting is like, now, is there some sort of a monitoring technology to build around this, right? That's kind of where like the blue teamer in me goes, is like, how can I watch out for this stuff? But wild, just a wild like finding and some really cool research. Hat tip to those guys. Like they did some cool stuff. It was really cool to read about.
Yeah, we talked about, burning a satellite up, but what about ping-ponging it off of the other ones? You can take out the whole constellation, I bet.
I immediately went to so there's two things there. One, I'm assuming there is some sort of a mesh network or a peer-to-peer network up there. There's got to be, right? Like,
I think that's Starlink uses something like that.
Yeah. And then the other side of it is, I don't know, Chris, I immediately went to that James Bond movie. Was it Tomorrow Never Dies? Where they ended up like moving the GPS satellites by like 20 degrees. So a ship ended up in sovereign waters as opposed to international waters. And then like it launched the whole war and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. It's probably an extreme. Every year as technology gets better, more and more James Bond villains come to life.
Yeah. I'm more and more convinced that the great filter in Fermi's paradox is runaway technology, but that can be a conversation for another time. One more from Black Hat. Cisco Thales researchers discovered 5 critical vulnerabilities in Broadcom's BCM5820X series chips used in Dell's Control Vault 3 secure enclave hardware. These chips are embedded in over 100 Dell Latitude and Precision models, business class machines widely deployed across industries, including government and high security sectors. The flaws, tracked as a bunch of CVEs, allow attackers to gain code execution on the secure enclave, steal sensitive data such as cryptographic keys and biometrics, and potentially persist undetected within the firmware. Control Vault 3 functions as a hardware root of trust, storing credentials and security tokens in firmware isolated from the host OS. Philip Lolhiret, again, sorry about the name, senior vulnerability researcher at Talos, detailed how a low-privilege user can abuse these flaws to compromise Control Vault, leak secrets, and implant persistent firmware backdoors. There was one CVE in particular that was an unsafe deserialization bug, which can be triggered via exposed Windows APIs without admin access. Successful exploitation grants full code execution on Control Vault, enabling firmware modifications and exfiltration of sensitive materials like fingerprint templates or smart card credentials. Wow, this seems like a pretty big problem here.
It does. Wow. Hide your fingerprints. Biometrics are about to get taken over here. Really interesting. I think this is a series. It's a handful of CVEs, everyone. Chris and I aren't going to read out the exact names of them. Just note it's a handful of CVEs. all released in 2025. But interestingly enough, Chris, I think this once again poses like some really novel research of like the dangers that could happen with vulnerable code and things like that. I'm not meaning to like diminish it. We don't need to go into it too much. I think there's a lot of vulnerable code that was deployed as a part of this, and hats off to the researcher whose name I don't even want to try to butcher. But hats off to the researcher who found this. But really kind of the scope of it is what's concerning, right? But we can't necessarily fault and say, how could you deploy this much vulnerable code out there? It was built into a Dell model that sold really well, or models that have sold really well. And unfortunately, it's just kind of a vulnerability that's been found out there. Chris, what I don't know, I'd have to dig into more, is like how easy it is to weaponize this. I know we've kind of got the details, but the talk was just 2 days ago, and we might see more come out of it. But I'd be curious, like, to see how much is needed. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe physical access is necessary, like at least one of them, because I'm reading through it. One of the mitigations recommended by Talos was that you disable fingerprint login in situations like a hotel room or public coffee shops or stuff like that, which tells me that part of this likely needs some sort of physical access in order to get there. You know, now there is a subset of the world to whom this is a very real threat today. But to everyone else, I would expect to see hopefully some updates come along where folks are able to actually patch this if they are, thinking about it. But if I had to narrow in and put a magnifying glass on the area of concern, Chris, I think it's probably government contractors, people with clearances in foreign countries and things like that who might be leaving a laptop in a room at some point.
The evil maid attack.
Yeah, that's the ones who probably need to be concerned about this.
Yeah. So in another demonstrated scenario, a local attacker with brief physical access to a laptop, say left unattended in a hotel room, could pry open the chassis and use a custom USB connector to access the unified security hub board directly. This bypasses the OS disk encryption and even login requirements, offering a route to firmware compromise without the victim's knowledge. If the system relies on fingerprint login, the attacker could reprogram Control Vault to accept arbitrary fingerprints, completely defeating biometric authentication. The researcher noted that such attacks are detectable only if chassis intrusion detection is pre-configured, something many organizations neglect. Dell responded by saying it began pushing mitigations to customers on June 13th and referred users to its security advisory for patch details. Both Dell and Talos confirmed that no in-the-wild exploitation has been observed to date. Still, the impact surface is significant. Talos is not aware of the Broadcom chip being used outside of Dell's Control Vault 3, but the affected laptops are widely used in sensitive operational environments. Cisco Talos advises customers to ensure firmware is fully updated and to disable fingerprint authentication in high-risk situations involving physical access. While firmware updates can be delivered via Windows Update, Dell typically releases them weeks earlier, creating a gap during which systems may remain exposed. Broadcom, for its part, did not respond to requests for comment. This disclosure underscores that firmware-level security, particularly in secure enclave architectures, must be scrutinized as closely as application and OS-level defenses. Yeah, so this is the cloak and dagger stuff right here.
Absolutely. Be careful, protect those devices. And this is something I'm assuming Chris is probably going to generate some sort of internal IT advisories. Like change this stuff now.
Okay, so last one I got for us today is not to do with Black Hat, but rather some good news for the community. CISA and FEMA have jointly announced over $100 million in cybersecurity grant funding for the 2025 fiscal year, targeting state, local, and tribal governments. The funding is divided between two programs, the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, or SLCGP, and the Tribal Cybersecurity Grant Program, or TCGP. The majority of the funding, $91.7 million, will go to state and local governments under the SLCGP, aimed at improving their cybersecurity infrastructure through personal hiring, cybersecurity planning, exercise, and enhancing digital service provided to the communities. These grants are part of a broader $1 billion allocation made possible by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, which created the State and Local Cybersecurity Improvement Act. The total funding is being distributed over 4 years. According to CISA Acting Director Madhu Mukala, oh man, I'm 0 for 3 on names today. The funding is designed to help communities across the U.S. reinforce their digital infrastructure and reduce cyber risks through targeted, locally led initiatives. This sounds like great news, Matt.
I like it. Always good to finish on a high note. Yeah, money given towards state and local cybersecurity and tribal cybersecurity is always a great thing. I've worked with some of these, or I should say, I've worked with organizations in these sectors in the past. They are widely and severely underfunded, and this, I hope, will go a long way. Chris, I'm doing some basic math in my head about the United States and how many states there are and how many millions that may mean per state, and it feels like it's wildly underfunding what they need. But the flip side of it is something's better than nothing, and I hope it goes to good use. I don't know. I didn't read to it if there's any guardrails put on what they can and can't spend. You might have more information about that in just a moment. But I am like really excited to see this type of thing going out because it's what's necessary for these groups.
Yeah, especially with like the funding being cut in other sectors and parts of the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So CISA is handling the technical side of the program, serving as a subject matter expert for cybersecurity, while FEMA is managing the grant administration side, responsible for fund allocation, financial oversight, and compliance. As part of the SLCGP's structure, at least 80% of awarded funds must be distributed to local governments, and at least 25% of those local allocations must be directed specifically to rural areas. This design acknowledges the particular vulnerability of these entities, which often have limited cybersecurity maturity and have increasingly been targets for ransomware attacks, especially in sectors like public education. Eligible applicants must submit through FEMA's Grant Outcomes FEMA Go platform, where submissions will be jointly reviewed by FEMA and CISA. States will have the opportunity to revise and finalize their cybersecurity plans in collaboration with these agencies. Key technical requirements and application criteria are available through CISA's official documentation. This structured federal approach is intended to move cybersecurity capacity building forward at the community level, where gaps have historically been the most severe. Oh, that's great that some of it is being pushed out to the rural areas. I know that, there's a lot of like small school districts and water plants with one guy trying to do all the things, and probably very vulnerable to people looking to harm them.
Yeah, I hope this will go a long way, and it will definitely address some of the shortcomings in some of those teams that are out there. So, if anyone's listening to this and you work in that space and you have the ability to be either a FEMA member or you can get access to some of that money or apply for it, please by all means do so. Take it while it's out there. Chris, there's a statistic from I think many years ago where it was like a large number of government grant programs just expired and the money wasn't entirely used just because folks didn't apply for it. So in this case, I would say like, please do take every dollar you can.
Yeah, go get it.
That's right.
Awesome, Matt. Another one in the books. I don't even know where we're at right now. We're coming up on 240 soon. So
too cool.
Wow. Yeah.
Too cool. Awesome. Well, for anyone who's curious, Chris actually did not attend Black Hat this year, which is why I got to give the personal thing, which is why you're not seeing a live episode. However, I'm hoping we'll have a chance to record another one in person together sometime soon in the future. We'll see. But with that said, Chris, it's always a pleasure to be here with you, man. Appreciate it. And I'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Take care, sir.
See ya.
And that brings us to the end of another Intel Chat. You can support this show by sharing your favorite episodes with a friend, or subscribing and giving us a rating or leaving a comment on your chosen podcast platform. If you want to be part of the conversation and access the intel we talk about in real time, you can join our community forum at community.limacharlie.io. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you on the next one.